I think a lot of people should know more about this topic, the cryptocurrencies and everything that has to do with the cryptos. And Levent knows everything about it. So I'm really happy that you're here, Levent. And
thank you for your kind words.
Just share your knowledge.
Thank you for the very nice introduction, Juliet, and increasing the expectations. I'm Levent. I'm from Lions Compliance, a boutique consultancy firm that I just started, focusing and specializing on fintech companies, offering their services within the EU and specifically within the fintech digital value and payment systems. Before Lions Compliance, I worked at Bitvavo, the leading cryptocurrency exchange in Netherlands as a compliance officer, and before that, I was in another sector-leading company, this time in the field of electronic money and prepaid value. The company was called Recharge.com. Both companies semi-regulated in their respective sectors, which brought a lot of challenges, but also opportunities, and both companies which are about to be regulated heavily. I will be focusing on the crypto today, as I hope that many of you have an interest or have some sort of involvement with crypto before. So since I don't have a co-host, I will be making you all my co-host, and we'll try to keep this session a bit more interactive. So my first question is, how many of you have previously interacted with crypto? So it can be that maybe your respective firms had a client who was in the crypto sector, or you are a user of crypto yourself, you're a day-to-day trader or a professional trader. I've seen some hands, but for the rest, yeah, it's then we will go on a regular journey together and then see the regulatory horizon for crypto.
Everyone who raised his hand or her hand was below. No, it's not true. Okay, I was also participating in crypto.
Trader will also I work for the Netherlands Authority for Consumers and Markets. And for example, crypto is one of the issues that's supposed to be a product as in the unfair commercial practices, right? Yeah. Still, people go to the Authority for Financial. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks for the insight. That was actually good insight for me as well. Before we jump into the current state of crypto in the EU, I will give you a quick glimpse on the past of crypto and what was the original idea behind it when it was first derived by Satoshi Nakamoto, the person who wrote the white paper for Bitcoin back in early 2000s, I believe. And then the original visionaries for crypto, their idea was that to make the financial system a bit more democratized, reach out to the unbanked people, and disrupt the traditional finance sector by eliminating the intermediaries and also the need for the central authorities. But what we see now in 2024 is quite the opposite. So the central authorities are heavily involved with the crypto. They are coming with different regulatory regimes from their perspective, and the intermediaries are also quite intrigued, and they also want a piece of the market that is crypto, as we see that a lot of money, a lot of value has been funneled the last few years, especially with the particular bull run that we experienced. So what is the regulatory regime? I think as legal professionals, that's usually the first question we ask when we talk about a certain product or a service. And on the EU level, we currently have a directive level instrument on anti-money laundering. This is not a crypto-specific directive, and it's just added crypto exchanges to its scope for certain aspects of it. So it's quite limited in scope. And that also means, since this is a directive, local registration schemes apply to offer crypto-related services. This already brings a lot of challenges for market participants who envision to become a leader within the whole European Union, because that means they need to go to the respective authority for each market, get their approval for a registration. And what we experienced in Bitvavo was that different authorities have different standards and different understandings of concepts. And as some of our previous speakers also mentioned, the regulators are not necessarily the best subject matter experts on these technical aspects, on these technical concepts. And we also have some indirectly applicable instruments, EMD2, Electromagnetic Directive 2, and Payment Services Directive 2. These are more relevant for the fund flow for crypto-related services, particularly if that service has a connection to fiat, which I will get to more when we look at the future aspects, future state of crypto and how it's going to be. When we look at the market, we see that there are some local champions and international actors competing for each EU market. So with the Netherlands, we have Bitwavo, as I mentioned. In Germany and Austria, we have Bitpanda. In Luxembourg and France, and within the rest of Europe, we have Bitstamp. And then we have these international actors like Coinbase, Binance, Crypto.com, and Kraken. So it is quite a fragmented sector. There is not necessarily one clear winner, and also not necessarily one clear winner for all Europe. We talked about registration schemes, and authorities actively enforce these via issued fines. So we see in the past that the Dutch central bank issued fines against 3 main crypto exchanges for operating without registration. And also in other jurisdictions, crypto exchanges were forced to leave the market because they weren't going to be able to adhere to the requirements and get a registration. What's the market dynamics like? Well, we had a long bear season, followed by a bull run. So I joined Bitwavo back in 2022 or 2021, I believe. And during that period, there was a long bear season, meaning there was not much interest in crypto. The values were down. And there were also some negative developments occurring in the market. The FTX collapse, I think all of us probably heard about it. An exchange that was once valued $22 billion, completely collapsing, and huge scandal popping out. If you have some free time, which I'm assuming you don't have that much, but it's an interesting read to see how dysfunctional and how lack of internal control environment FTX had. One specific example I can give is basically FTX purchasing these summer houses in Bahamas on behalf of their employees with no records of it whatsoever. So there was lack of control, let's say. And we also had the Luna crash, where a particular crypto asset basically lost 99.9% of its value in one day. And the investors suffered heavily because of it. Now I give you a bit of a negative picture, but then this was actually followed with some positive developments, especially in the last year, where we have now experiencing a bull run. And I think the main highlight here is the approvals of Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs by SEC in the United States. This serves as a great bridge between the traditional finance and crypto sector, where the traditional finance sectors now have a chance to invest indirectly for Bitcoin and Ethereum. And this ties up to the next point that they are eyeing the crypto market. We have seen that Robinhood, a US-based financial trade platform, acquired a EU-based crypto exchange platform to test the waters and see if there's a future within the EU as well. By the way, whenever you have questions, feel free to ask. As I said, I want to keep it interactive. So what lies in the future for crypto? On the right-hand side, you will see a lot of abbreviations. I think those are our favorites, a lot of regulatory frameworks. And you might have guessed maybe when it comes to crypto that it's just a bunch of cowboys acting freely without much regulation or supervision. And that has been the case maybe in the past, but now what we see is that the EU authority especially is taking a lot of action on different aspects that is really relevant for crypto sector. So first takeaway we had was that there's much more harmonization on the EU level in comparison to one directive that was indirectly relevant for crypto. Now we have a dedicated regulation called MICA, and the TFR, the regulation on travel rule, the regulation on AML, the regulation on digital operational resiliency. So the EU authority clearly wants to harmonize things on the EU level and create an even level playing field. And how they achieve it is by having more connections to other sectors with similar characteristics and risks. So we see that for certain existing legal instruments like the travel rule or the DAC 7, which is about the taxation, the new iterations of these extend their scope to the crypto. Also, there are also new initiatives like the AMLR and DORA, as I mentioned, these new frameworks that are relevant, that are created for all relevant sectors, one of which is now crypto. And last but not least, there is now a main regulatory framework And this is more or less mirroring an existing framework called MiFID II, the Directive on Financial Instruments. So the EU authority clearly has an understanding of how to make crypto part of its regulatory system and how to manage the risk associated with it. But that brings a lot of challenges, obviously, to identify and manage compliance and licensing related obligations and requirements, because now we have all these regulations, all of which are upcoming and will be enforced within 2025 or 2026. And for market participants, they need to prioritize what they are going to focus on first and how they are going to be able to comply with the regulation. And considering also the market dynamics where the market is relatively homogeneous, the products and service offerings, you can distinguish, obviously, you can target different audiences, and there is different type of crypto assets or products you can offer, but it is still relatively homogeneous, and there's a potential for a winner-take-it-all environment where it will force you to be a lot more competitive and maybe a lot more risk-oriented. But on the other hand, you're also now aware of the fact that there's a lot of regulation coming up, and if you do not play your cards right, you might not even be able to compete at all because you don't have the necessary licenses. So that means, yeah, there might be an even level playing field, but there is a potential cost of higher barrier to entry. So what do we mean by the level playing field? There will be a passporting scheme coming in with MICA, which I will talk about a bit more in the upcoming slides. So similar to the regulation, similar to the Directive on Payment Services and Electronic Money Directive, electronic money, obtaining a license from one EU home authority will allow you to offer your services within the entire EU. And that is quite advantageous for the crypto service providers. However, we now see that how each of these legal instruments will coexist together will bring a lot of complications and challenges. And B, certain jurisdictions might still have heavier regulatory burden in comparison to others, even though it is a regulation level instrument, especially with regards to the incorporation requirements. We expect to see some deviation. Certain jurisdictions like Germany and France are a bit more stricter when it comes to these requirements. And if you are already established in one of these jurisdictions and designated them as your home authority, then you might not have much choice but to face this heavier regulatory burden. There are still exemptions and exclusions that you might benefit from, but we will also see how these will be in practice, as MICA and regulating crypto on this level with this depth of detail is not something that no one experienced before, obviously, so it's a bit of a Pandora's box. It might have unintended consequences, negatively or positively. Some highlights and keynotes from MICA. So this is the main piece of legislation for us within the crypto sector. And when we talk about crypto, this might sound a bit of an abstract concept. And most of people associate crypto just with Bitcoin and maybe with Ethereum, and that's about it. But there are a lot of different applications of crypto. At the end of the day, if I have to give a technical description of it, it's basically the application of the blockchain technology, the underlying technology for the currencies. And how you make use of these currencies is different based on the type of services you're going to be offered. The EU authority come up with three main asset classifications. First off, we have the electronic money tokens. These are basically mirroring the definition from the electronic money directive. So it's a crypto asset that has set its value fixed with one particular central currency. An example is like Euro C or Euro T. So these are not necessarily like financial investment devices, but they are more used for transfer of value. We also have the utility asset reference tokens. Those are a bit more complicated as they are referencing more than one currency or value or right. There, the authority, I think, intentionally used a bit of vague language as they are also testing the waters themselves as to how to regulate and classify each of these tokens. And then we have the utility tokens, which are mostly the assets that are tied to a particular service or product, which will be quite interesting, not maybe for payment systems or crypto as an investment instrument, but for the service and product offerings that we will see more in the different sectors. that are aiming to disrupt that particular sector. And utility tokens can be a great way for the end users to have a bit more involvement with the particular product and service they're using in. Outside these three main asset classifications, we also have a blanket classification, and also, interestingly, certain aspects that are certain types of crypto assets, let's say, that are intentionally excluded from the scope, which might be followed through in the new iterations. So the NFTs, maybe you heard them, the non-fungible tokens, those monkey pictures that you see online, and then you can copy paste, and then it's basically yours as well. Those have an underlying, so those basically are the blockchain technology being applied to the intellectual property, right? And that has a lot of potential, but the current iteration of it is something that the regulator decided to stay away from classifying and regulating. Might be because they don't know how to do it, might be because they don't want to legitimize it. There we will see the upcoming actions of the EU authority. So these are the asset classifications, but what does it mean for the market participants? So there are licensing requirements, obviously, in order to offer your services instead of a registration scheme. So what that means for us is that the registration schemes are usually lighter in terms of the obligations that you need to adhere to, whereas for licensing, it's much more heavier. And this is now also a bit more specified in the piece of legislation where the type of service you're going to offer for crypto will determine the type of license that you need to get. You can offer your service as a crypto exchange. You can offer your services to execute orders on behalf of your clients. You can offer your services to hold their crypto assets on behalf of them. And for each of these, there are different requirements that I'm not going to deep dive into. Who will deep dive into them, however, will be these two lovely authorities on the right-hand side, the ESMA and EBA. They will be drafting ESMA, I believe, just drafted the final draft for the regulatory technical standards. So what regulation describes as certain requirements and obligations, how they need to be implemented, those are described in those standards. And these documents are quite exhaustive and comprehensive already. And all the market participants are now implementing the requirements therein in order to manage their tight deadlines. As MICA will have an enforcement date as of January 1st, the application period has already opened for the market participants. However, with the grandfathering period, I believe, of 18 months or 12 months, depending on the jurisdiction, I believe Netherlands actually implemented a tighter regime. That doesn't give too much time to the crypto service providers to take a look at the type of service they want to offer or they're already offering and what kind of license they need to have and what does it mean for their business. One key takeaway that we had and I had, and it was also really interesting, is the fact that traditional finance sectors, for their respective domains, if they want to do something crypto related with it, they can rely on their existing license. They don't need to apply for an additional one. That is basically a bit detrimental to the even level playing field that I previously mentioned, because whilst the crypto exchanges, the current participants, needs to go through a licensing regime, these actors can already rely on their existing license due to the perception that, these are already tighter licensing regimes, these are trustworthy participants, and in their respective sectors, we already regulate them on a certain level, meaning that we don't need to do something additional. They just need to notify us on the fact that they're going to offer their services. So that's also what I meant by the involvement of traditional finance. And we see now that this has been incentivized on the authority level. So what are some focus points on this MICA, this piece of legislation? So the anti-money laundering and internal controls obviously takes a huge chunk, as crypto has been associated with, let's say, negative aspects of it, the scams, the frauds, the rug pulls where the crypto assets are marketed also sometimes by these celebrities. I think in the US we've seen great examples of this, where even Super Bowl, there was this gigantic ads from Matt Damon and some other famous Hollywood actors. And certain assets that were genuinely solely created by the influencers to take advantage of their fan base, and then basically draining all the money in and making the crypto asset that their fans hold worthless, means that we need more internal controls, and we need to make sure that bad actors are also disincentivized from abusing the crypto assets. So what does it mean for a service provider? Well, it all starts also with an AML CFT risk assessment. We heard about the risk assessment in the other domains, in the AI Act, in the Data Act. And for crypto service providers, this is quite crucial. They need to take a look at their offered products and services, the geographies they are active in, the delivery channels they will be using, and the type of transactions that they will be offering. And they need to make a risk assessment for each of these aspects and then describe what kind of mitigating measures and controls they have in place, and giving the underlying message that the risks is under control and that they have everything in place. This in practice is still a bit of debatable. As I mentioned, different authorities have different standards and different perceptions, even though this assessment framework is mirrored from the Financial Action Task Force recommendations. I'm quite intrigued personally to see how it will transpire. And the internal controls is where I think a lot of companies might struggle and might lead to a higher barrier to entry, because you need to have sufficient human and financial resources. What I mean here is that you need to have dedicated teams focused on financial crime, on financial risk, operational risk, different aspects of risk in general, on customer support and onboarding, and make sure that the human resources that you invested into are trained properly, the procedures that they are following are updated and reflects the actual practice, and also the financial resources, because at the end, operational expenses usually are the big chunk of the costs for these type of service providers, and they need to invest further also in their technical infrastructure to make sure some of the aspects I will talk about, like the ICT risk management, is done sufficiently and properly and with the right people and right technical infrastructure in place. That means you need to have adequate systems. You cannot just rely on your legacy or on the notion that what brought you so far can take you further. You need to take a holistic and maybe an existential look in your business model and also in your underlying technical infrastructure to see what you need to build and what you need to change. One highlight here is the consumer protection and market abuse aspect. As I mentioned, the end users suffered heavily from certain negative events occurred in the sector. And the regulators want to make sure that, first of all, the client's assets, let it be crypto or fund, are safekept properly, that these are segregated from the company's own funds and are kept in a secure environment to prevent another FTX collapse or another Luna crash. This is quite similar to, there you see some similarities if you are an expert in that area to maybe to MiFID II. And if you read through the MICA legislation, you will see a lot of similarities as you go on. There are also certain disclosure requirements you need to disclose on potential conflict of interest. You also need to disclose the type of assets you offer, the risk profile of those assets you offer if you're an exchange, and on your general practices. The complaints handling has a dedicated regulatory technical standards, so you can see that the authorities are really focused on the end user and how they're going to be dealt with by the market participants. And since this is a highly risky sector, the prohibition on insider dealing, the unlawful disclosure of inside information and market manipulation, all market participants needs to have effective controls in place to make sure that they do not have this kind of incidents happening on their platform, as the trustworthiness of the platform will have a huge role in their relationship and in their long-term success when it comes to their end users and their partners and their home authorities. And the ICT risk management framework, this is the one where DORA, the Digital Operational Resiliency Act, is also touching upon heavily, whilst that is more dedicated for, I think, for all financial service actors. MICA also has a dedicated section on the risk management framework for areas unique for crypto assets, and especially the third-party service providers and certain aspect of the business models that you outsourced those needs to be supervised really thoroughly, and you need to have a really great second line and third line in place to make sure that your third parties are effectively adhering to the compliance requirements that you are adhering yourself. So what does all this mean for the challenges and opportunities for the future of crypto? Yes. Well, I think I talked about each of these probably, yeah. Well, on the right-hand side, you see a business model. And on the upper side, there is the growth strategy. I think every business aspires to grow, unless you are the market-leading institution. But even then, you would like to make sure that you sustain your growth and do not left behind by the competition. And we see different types of strategies that is supporting the business model that is in the middle. So the scope, sustainability, and scalability of this business model is directly impacted by the regulatory environment surrounding it, because all these strategies that you see will be impacted by the regulation. How your ecosystem is operating and what is subjected to is impacted by regulation. What your operating model is going to look like. So which resources and which resources you're going to make use of, which activities you can do, which partners you need or you would like to have your value proposition right and your revenue streams in check. All of these aspects have a tie with the regulation, because those establish the absolute boundaries that you can basically operate within and then be creative within. How you deal with the regulation? Yeah, there are different ways you can do it. You can be reactive, but that's not my way of doing things, because that means you need to do things by force, most of the times in a rush, and that also means you need to find shortcuts. And those shortcuts may not always lead to places where you like to go, because what happens in the end was that you need to give away certain aspects of probably your value proposition or your customer segment or your channels, and that leads to a maybe less successful proposition strategy and thus less successful growth strategy. Or you can be proactive and by design. I think the by design word we used a lot, also old speakers. Security by design, privacy by design. And here, yeah, I think you can be compliant by design in a way with the upcoming regulation if you assign the right ownership to the respective domain owners in the private company. That doesn't mean that compliance and legal departments in-house needs to take all the responsibility to have these regulations applied in technical aspects of it, but that the respective domain owners, so a product owner, an onboarding manager, also understanding what the regulation means for their respective domain, how it will be impacted, and what they need to do to make sure they can continue to operate and even make it even better and perhaps make it a competitive advantage, because everyone within that ecosystem is dealing with the same issue. So last but not least, I think the innovator's dilemma will be huge here. What do I mean here is that the market-leading firms may neglect on taking a look at what's ahead, because they are in the belief that what took them so far led them to become a market leader, and they may neglect that aspect of it. But that means that may cause them to be reactive and that they take action by force. And this can create an opportunity for the other market participants, because if they are proactive and then they do things by design, they may achieve success. I think a lot of the problems we see here, maybe also you see with some of your clients, is that, in a highly regulated industry, it's really hard to be successful, and as you most of the time being compliant, adhering to the rules and regulation, and the profitability and the scalability of the business contradict one another. However, I'm on the belief that, okay, if you can incorporate the legal and compliance frameworks and process properly to your growth strategy so that you proactively address these regulatory complications and your DNA, which is, I think, even more important. So your company culture, your core values and characteristics, your principles, your mission and vision have this aspect of what is coming next, what kind of the characteristics of the sector that you are in and the rules that you need to play with. If you have these two, if you have the legal and compliance frameworks and processes incorporated into these two, you will most likely be more successful because A, you can take more risks because they will be much more calculated. That doesn't mean that when you are compliant, you can take less risk. You know what to do. It's not really white or black. It's always a shade of gray, as I like to say. So you can find the right shade of gray for your respective business and then take much more risk. And you can also have more consistent growth because your business model, which takes into account the regulatory framework, will be much more future-proof. And if you need to change things, then you can also do that with that regulatory strategy in mind. I don't know whether we still have time for questions. Probably not.
One question.
One question. But,
Moment. Yeah.
yes.
The question about digital euro, how does that fit into this?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the original header of the topic. We forgot to update my topic, so apologies for that. Yeah, digital euro is a different aspect, different concept, because what we see now is that, as I said, every participant wants to take a piece of crypto market, and the traditional finance sectors are doing that by trying to enforce, lobbying for these investment devices like ETFs so that they can participate more. And I think this is a way for the authorities to be a bit more involved and take a piece of that crypto from the crypto market. And there are still ongoing initiatives. There is not necessarily clear direct legal framework for digital euro. But what I anticipate it will be that it's not necessarily going to be an investment device, but more, let's say, a e-money token or a asset reference token. So used whether to transfer value or hold value, I think that's actually covered both of the concepts. And the idea, I think, behind is that authorities, like the central governments, believe a digital euro will have, especially the European central banks believe that it will have much more reputation and a good image for the end user, for the consumers, for its trustworthiness and its security aspects. However, how the end user will respond, that is yet to be seen. To be honest, I don't think the public involvement on that level will be a huge success, especially with the challenges they will have with the rollout and then getting the mass adoption, unless they do take some prohibitive or restrictive actions against the private sector. But I think that's for another time.
I think we just have to thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.